Mike Schaefer, Husker247 Sports, joining us here on the 42 Degree Hotline. Good morning, Schaefer. How are you?
Good morning, guys. I clearly got things going in the right direction when I couldn't figure out how to get any of the Bluetooth devices I have to work. So, I apologize. That's probably what prompted that random ad that we got to hear there.
Maybe. I don't know.
You can register for the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
It's the last week.
It is good advice. This is the last week to do so. So Gary and I are talking about, obviously, the flip from last night. And Gary, as he stated, maybe flip is not the right way to put it. This was in the works. You go all the way back to the Colorado game, knowing that, he was there. And I think that's when you started hearing more about, that Alabama thing is a little soft right now, is more of a matter of when, not if, for Dawson Merritt. But for anybody who's watched his film, and I know you've studied a lot more than just that. You've seen the guy. He's impressive, and knowing that he can put on some weight too. And Gary was just talking about that overall linebacking core that you look at in that class. I mean, it's just nice officially to have that addition and what this means to that recruiting class, but also this defense going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really exciting kind of second level group they have in this 25 class now, with Dawson Merritt as sort of the key guy of it, though that shouldn't take anything away from Christian Jones or Pierce Newberry, or even Jeremiah Jones, who is still part of the class for now. We'll see what happens with him in Missouri. But he's a guy that could be at the second level for Nebraska with his legit size. And they've collected some really interesting athletes that can turn and run. And what I kind of like about it is Christian Jones more likely lines up as your traditional sort of inside linebacker. I think Pierce Newberry is definitely an edge. And then Dawson Merritt's a blend of the two. I mean, when they initially were recruiting him, they liked him more as an inside linebacker. Alabama really came over the top with the Wolf position, which is sort of their edge position. And now Nebraska's talked to him about the idea of playing Jack as well. And so I think a lot of it is you get that kid here, you let him kind of find his way into the program, and then you sort of feel like you got to figure out where you can maximize him. And maybe sometimes that's an inside linebacker, maybe sometimes that's an outside linebacker. Alan True, our analyst, covers a lot of the Midwest here and covers the territory that Dawson Merritt is in, actually made an interesting comparison. Physically, they don't look the same, but he thought that the way that Dawson Merritt moves and plays reminded him a lot of Mekhi Bear. And I thought that was really interesting, because if you put the height of Dawson Merritt on Mekhi Bear, you've got a linebacker that can run, but also can get, his hands up, be put in, situations where he can make a tight window for a quarterback to have to throw through while he's in coverage, in addition to being able to run and to attack while playing forward. I thought that was a really sort of interesting comparison from a guy who's watched a lot more high school football and film than I have, and is on it the way that Alan True is. And I think Nebraska fans would certainly take a even bigger version of Mekhi Bear that can run and can hit like that too.
Yeah, there's some excitement. The linebackers haven't been great over the last couple of weeks, but they're going to have a different identity next year. But there's some young players in the linebacker core. Rob Dvorak's got a really good chance for the next couple of years for that to pop with really quick cover in space type of linebackers. Shape, now we get all excited because the reality of the world is December 4th is, I guess, signing day, whatever it looks like these days with no national letter of intent. The portal opens on the 9th of December. So Nebraska's already started to identify some targets, potential targets, or more needs that they have. But we're in flip season. Now we've had one. Let's get greedy. Chase Lofton, Cortez Mills, Aiden Mantui. Who's next on your board that possibly Nebraska could flip here in the next couple of weeks?
I mean, there's a possibility all three of those guys end up in Nebraska's class. The one that maybe I'm not entirely sure. Aiden, I think it's Manitai. Maybe I can't remember.
Right. You're probably right.
When they were recruiting him in June, but I think Nebraska. I think that's a done deal if the door is open. And I wonder if Nebraska's waiting to see what happens with a Jeremiah Jones or maybe somebody else on the board before they decide on that one. But I think if Nebraska wanted to, that could be a done deal already. And then we're looking at Chase Lofton. They're certainly recruiting hard. I don't know if he's set to visit anywhere this weekend. I was kind of looking around on the socials and I hadn't seen anything on that. So we'll see if he pops up somewhere. I'm also curious if Nebraska doesn't try to get him back for the Wisconsin game as well. And so I like where Nebraska's at with Chase Lofton. The big one is Cortez Mills. And, now that the Dawson Merritt thing has been finished off, this is where I think a lot of my attention has kind of turned, because I think Nebraska has a great opportunity here for a wide receiver that would be a really nice fit in your program. Someone who's probably intrigued by the idea of a Dana Holgorsen offense as much as anybody. Someone that I think is hearing from Jamar Mosey as well as Garrett McGuire, in addition to the rest of Nebraska's offensive staff. And then I've talked to guys down in Oklahoma, and he's labeled as a flight risk by the OU staff. Like they think it's going to be a struggle to keep him. And if they're talking about coaching changes, as they have a horrible year, they're talking about offensive staff changes. His guy's Emmett Jones. If Emmett Jones is gone as a wide receivers coach, Cortez Mills isn't going to Oklahoma. And so I think Nebraska has kind of done a nice job working the background. They've recruited Cortez Mills a long time. I mean, it goes back to when Philip Simpson arrived, because I was his high school coach. Yeah. So Nebraska got a great relationship there. The family likes Nebraska again here. He wouldn't surprise me to appear in this class later on.
Talking to Mike Schaefer, Husker247 Sports here on 1620 The Zone. All right, let's get into tomorrow, because you mentioned Dana Holgorsen, huge storyline.
Game?
Yeah. There is a game. I like when we get this positivity.
Coaching changes.
You're right.
They're still playing football? Are you sure?
We're talking recruiting. There's still bowl eligibility out there, my friend. This game, I know at some point before we get off the air, we're going to have to make a decision. I'm having such a tough time figuring out what type of score and what this thing is going to look like as we get closer to it, Schaefer, especially on the offensive side of this. And that's probably the best place to start right now, just with the addition of Dana Holgorsen. We know Dylan is healthy and he's ready to go. What is your overall expectation offensively tomorrow?
Expectation is a perfect word. I don't know that there's a lot that I can expect, right? Because I don't know what this is going to look like. I've never really watched a team that's brought in an outside offensive coordinator and just stuck them in with 3 games left to go. Mm-hmm. And then you're doing it on the road at a place that I'm not going to say that it's a massively difficult environment, but there's a lot more talent on USC's sidelines than a 4-win team at this point in the season. Yep. So this isn't exactly like an easy place to just drop in and have this sort of massive shift and then expect that it's going to go well. So in an ideal world, Nebraska hits the ground running. They put doubt in USC's head right off the bat and make them have to fight their own demons, while Nebraska is able to kind of move the ball up and down the field against defense that isn't particularly good. I mean, that's the worst part about this is if Nebraska is wired a certain way, this is a game that's very winnable. But I'm worried that they're not quite going to be there yet. It's hard to bet on a team that's been as inconsistent. You don't know what version of the defensive line is going to be there. You don't know if Nebraska is going to be able to settle into the game right away, or if they're going to need a quarter and a half. You don't know if that secondary can match up with much better receivers against USC than the ones that torched them by UCLA. So there's just a lot. And then, of course, you've got a new quarterback for USC who's a little bit more mobile. Does that cause issues for Nebraska's defense? So as a team, it's really hard to know what to expect. For the offense, you just kind of throw up your hands and you just sit back and, we're in the business of needing to analyze and prognosticate. There's really not a lot that you can say. We don't know what it's going to look like on Saturday. We truly don't. They don't know. That's what makes it sort of a compelling thing right here at the end of the season. And if it gives them any kind of juice or a boost, that could be a really nice thing for a Nebraska team that definitely needs to find one more win, but could really write a unique story if they can rip off a few.
Does this give a boost to Matt Rhule?
In what sense?
Because this is unorthodox, a guy that talks about the process and the plan, clearly realized that the plan on one side of the ball is not working and has to really do something that to most people would be uncomfortable. So is this a boost to him? Because he's also, let's talk about, we know this, Shape. Let's talk about the personal side. Marcus Satterfield is a close friend of his. I mean, he had to make a big decision. I mean, Satterfield have a tough time coming back from something like this because a guy came off the street and is calling plays. So is this a boost of juice for Matt Rhule, or how do you think that he'll navigate as we kind of look at his body language and he looks like he's, this has been wearing on him when we see him tomorrow in LA?
Yeah, I think what this says to the fan base at large is Matt Rhule is here to figure out how to win football games in Nebraska. And I think that's a message that needed to be said. I think there's a lot of people that were unhappy, certainly with how the year had gone. We're unhappy with sort of the up and down performances. We're unhappy with Matt Rhule because he would say one thing and the team would play a different way. And that's not always, in his control. And it's fairly obvious the players have to make plays. At some point, we can talk about the coaches all we want. It's on the guys on the field that have to step up and do it. Now, are they put in the right position? Yada, yada, yada. But I think what it did is it kind of invigorated the fan base a little bit. I mean, think about the conversations you probably had on and off air all week long since this news. People are interested in Nebraska in a way that they weren't prior to it. People are excited about the future in the way that they weren't prior to it. I mean, I talked to Connor Happer on Monday, and I said that things look kind of scary in terms of where Nebraska is at, because it's hard to see where there was actual progress from year one to year two. It's hard to feel good about a program that's not winning when you have a veteran defense like this. Then you feel like you're going to let this season slip away without making meaningful gains. And now they have an opportunity to sort of change that narrative, and they have a little boost of fresh air. We don't know how it's going to go, but I think people appreciate making a tough decision and at least trying something rather than rolling the ball out there and trying to run the same offense that hasn't worked for most of the season in Big Ten play.
Defensively in this one, too, you brought up Maeva and having that whole new equation when it comes to how this defense will play. Just from when you factor in all the previous 9 games, your confidence level coming off the bye week, and I know the last bye week is not a good indicator of that, but coming off the bye week, and Gary brought this up too, when this team is expected to maybe flounder a little bit, they typically play like Ohio State. They play better. Overall expectation and confidence level in this defense starting with tomorrow's game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I can tell you that I'm overly confident. I think they have matchups that they can exploit. I think Nebraska's defensive line absolutely can be the best unit on the field. And if they're that way, the way they were against Ohio State, Nebraska has a much better chance of winning that game. But it has to start up front because you just don't have a good enough secondary. And that's unfortunately one of the things that has been exposed this year, that they were able to get by. And I don't know if Omar Brown made that big of a distinction for them last year or what it was, but on the back end, they are really struggling to get to spots, to diagnose play action, that kind of thing. So if your defensive front line, if Jamari Butler and MJ Sherman and Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmaker can go into LA and play a USC team that frankly has struggled when they face better defensive lines. I mean, you go turn on the Michigan game. They really struggled to score throughout that game. They needed their own defense to come up, and that's the other thing Nebraska has to take care of here. I mean, I think they absolutely can travel and they can play well. It's just hard to bank on it. They're so inconsistent that it's hard to sit here today and tell you that I'm confident that they can go and do this. I think they have the ability to go and do it, but I'm just not sure that, are we going to get the 30% where they're just not showing up, or are we going to get the 70% where they're world beaters? I mean, it seems like you should get the 70%, but we don't always see that.
Yeah, I think this is a fascinating game because this might be one of the rare Nebraska football games, Schaefer and Nick, that we have no idea what's going to happen.
Yep.
Usually we would try and pretend like we're smart and we could say, hey, this will happen because we've looked at the film. This is one of those games that, quite frankly, I can't wait for 3:00 tomorrow because I have no idea what's going to happen on both sides. I think maybe both coaches are wondering the same thing with the changes they've made. That's what makes this game fascinating for two teams who are combined 9-9.
Right. And I think the critical thing here is a team that can handle their emotions the best is going to be the team that wins on Saturday, because both of these teams are in the same spot. They're in the vice grip of, you got to win games now. Your fan base expects to win. The head coach knows that they've got to get more wins than what they have currently. And so to handle the highs and lows of it, if Nebraska starts the game hot, how do you sustain it? If Nebraska starts poorly, how do you flush it and go forward so you don't have UCLA part 2 or Indiana part 2?
Yeah.
So I think how Nebraska manages its emotions, and Rhule has kind of hinted at that all week. He said it on Monday. I think he said it again yesterday. How they sort of manage success or lack of success early in a game is going to be critical, I think, even more so tomorrow when both teams have a lot of tension. I think it's going to be an ugly game. If I'm really honest with you, I would imagine there's going to be a fair amount of mistakes and turnovers because I can see both teams playing pretty tight.
Mike Schaefer, Husker247 Sports, joining us every Friday at this time. Schaefer, enjoy the game. Always appreciate you coming on, man. Have a great weekend.
All right, guys. Have a good one.